Who said you can't have fun in church? We're continuing a series that we started a couple weeks ago called One-Hit Wonders. One-hit wonders. Because just like a one-hit wonder in music who shows up on the scene out of nowhere, drops a bomb of a viral hit song only to disappear into total obscurity, the Bible is actually filled with one-hit wonders too. We just know them by another name, the prophets. Specifically, the minor prophets. See, out of the 66 books in our Bibles, 12 of them were written by 12 minor prophets by the names of Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, whatever, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. I may have missed one in there, but the point is these 12 are known as the minor prophets, but I want us to realize that their minor prophet status should not fool us because there's nothing small or minor or unimportant about them. In fact, some of the greatest lessons we will learn in this series are as massive as anything else we could ever hear from in our Bibles. But unlike the more famous characters like the Apostle Paul, who himself wrote over a dozen books of the Bible, or King David, who we know as one who's written many, many Psalms, these minor prophets, they just kind of show up like a flash in the pan. They're there for a moment, they push forward the purposes of God for their 15 minutes of fame, and then they slide back into the shadows to be forgotten once more. But with their time in the spotlight, these 12 make serious waves. They answer some of the most important questions we could ever ask. One example that we're going to look at today is Micah. You can turn in your Bibles to Micah 6:8. We'll look there in a moment. But Micah 6:8. This may be, if I could summarize it this way, the one-hit wonder of all one-hit wonders in the Bible. It is the Rick Astley, never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down. Like that song that gets stuck in your head is that kind of verse. It gets stuck in your head, it gets stuck in your heart like nothing else ever could. But again, before we get there, I want us to think about this. That's right, that's the song. At the end of the day, as it relates to our relationship with God, what is the one big glaring question that you wish he would answer for you? Think about it. In your relationship with God, what is the one big question that you wish that he would just come out and say already? Because for some of us, maybe it's something like, God, are you really there? Or for others, we're a bit more philosophical and we say something like, God, are you even real? Or if you're so strong and so powerful and so loving, why does all this bad stuff happen? Maybe that's your question. Or maybe in our most vulnerable of moments, we'd be willing to ask the question of God, do you even love me? All of our many questions that plague us day in, day out. But if we dig deep beneath the surface of them all, I believe there is one single question that begins to emerge. And the question goes something like this: God, what do you want from me? What do you want in this? What do you want at all? What is it that you're after, God? What do you require? What do you want? God, what do you want? Wouldn't it be really nice if God just came out and answered that question? It turns out he does. He has something to say right here in Micah 6:8. Here's how he says it. This is Micah writing. He says, God has told you, O man, or O woman, or O humanity. He has told you what is good, and what does the Lord require? What does he want of you? And he says this: to do justice, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. What's good? What does God want? Here it is. Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly. So here's my prayer for us this morning as we dig in, and it's been my prayer for us as I've been preparing all week long. I've been praying that God would help us discover that doing justice means more than we think. Loving mercy demands more than we realize. And walking humbly is more important than we could ever imagine. Doing justice means more than we think. Loving mercy demands more than we realize, and walking humbly is more important than we imagine. Let's start with the first. Doing justice means more than we think. Now, to understand justice and what it is and what God is calling us to do in Micah 6:8, we've got to understand something here about Micah, that since Micah is a prophet, and he comes from a long line of prophets who all have been called by God in some way to share a message from the heart of God to the hearts of humanity. If we want to grasp what God means by doing justice here, we've got to trace what God means by justice throughout all the other prophetic books. And as we do so now, I want us to take note of the link that exists between justice and mercy. The link between justice and mercy. Jeremiah 9:24 says, "Let the one who boasts boast in this, that he understands and knows that I am the Lord who practices mercy and justice. For in these things God delights." Hosea 12:6, "Hold fast to justice and mercy." And then Psalm 85 continues, and it tells us that mercy and justice meet. See, through each of these passages, and there's many more like them, God is revealing something, that there is a connection between justice and mercy. Now, how far deep does that connection go? Isaiah is about to show us. Isaiah 30:18. "Therefore, the Lord exalts himself to show mercy to you." Why? Because the Lord is a God of justice. Did you catch this? So not only is mercy connected to justice, but God says his mercy is a direct result of him being a God of justice. These are not two separate things. Mercy stems from him being just. This seems contradictory, right? Like what does justice even mean? How is this possible? Well, Isaiah 61 is going to help us out. God says, "For I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery and wrong. I will faithfully give them their recompense." Now, typically our understanding of justice stops here, doesn't it? God's justice is about people getting what they deserve, in particular evil people getting what they deserve. That's how we think of it. Recompense, retribution, vindication. God will punish the evildoer. Now, I understand that at some level this is true because God will right all wrongs. But if you keep reading in this verse, we realize that he's saying something very different. Starting at the top. "So for I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery and wrong. I'll faithfully give them their recompense." And then watch this. What's the recompense? And then he says, "And I," this is God. God's like, "I will make an everlasting covenant with them." Like those that did wrong, I'm going to make a covenant with them. Wait a second. Where's all the talk of, and then it keeps going. "Their offspring shall be known among the nations, and their descendants in the midst of the peoples. All who see them shall acknowledge them, that they are the offspring of the Lord, that he has blessed." Like, what's happening? What is all this talk of blessing and offspring and everlasting covenant? Where's the vengeance, right? Where's the vindication? What we have to realize is that our concept of justice, of biblical justice, is so often misguided because it is more American than Christian. Typically, our understanding of justice is devoid of mercy. But according to God, justice and mercy are linked. Both are required, both are necessary, and when you divorce one from the other, you lose both. Isaiah 1:17 says, "Learn to do good, seek justice." And then he defines that for us. He says, "Correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, and plead the widow's cause. And then Isaiah expounds with some real life examples in chapter 58, verse 6 and 7. He says, is this not the kind of fasting that I have chosen? How many of us fast, if we fast at all? But he's saying there's a fasting even greater than that. He says, this is not the kind of fast I've chosen to loosen the chains of injustice and to set the oppressed free and break every yoke. It continues, is it not to share your food with the hungry and provide the wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, should you not clothe them so as not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? Lots of verses, I understand, but we've got to hear these all in concert together, because this is a concert of prophetic voices all on the subject. So let's put the pieces together and consider, what does Micah mean when he tells us that God requires that we do justice? Here's a definition. If this is helpful, write this down. According to God, doing justice is less about getting back at the oppressor and more about giving back to the oppressed. Say that again. It is less about getting back at the oppressor, the one who wrongs us, but it's actually more about giving back to those who are oppressed. See, justice, according to God, is not primarily about retribution. It's ultimately about restoration. To do justice is to see a need and then meet that need, particularly as it relates to those who are less fortunate than ourselves. Doing justice is less about trying to balance the scales of Lady Justice in our favor. It's actually more like one father's wisdom who tells his daughter not to look at her neighbor's bowl to see if she has more than she does, but instead to look and make sure that person has what they need. To do justice is to see a need and meet that need, especially as it relates to those less fortunate than us. It means doing something whenever we witness the injustice of our world. And this often comes at great cost to ourselves, which is why in our flesh, right, we naturally resist this. So what if the scales of justice are unequally tipped toward me? Those are my clothes. Why should I give them away? This is my homeland. Why should they get to live here? This is my money, my stuff, my time. Why should they get any of it? Please don't tell me I'm the only one in this room that's ever felt that way. And I'm not saying this because I'm proud of the attitude, but I'm saying it to let you know that you're not the only one who's ever felt like this before. Some of you have heard me share this story. My sister and I used to talk from time to time, and we actually joke from time to time about how little I used to do around the house as a kid growing up. My poor mom. She'd say, Peter, can you dust the living room? Peter, can you tidy up the dining room? Peter, we have company coming over. Can you put these things away in the family room? And my response was the same every time. It'd go something like this. Nah, Mom, sorry, I can't. Why is that? Mom, it's not my mess. Moms are like, you said what? It's not my mess, Mom. I looked downstairs, none of it's mine. It's my sister's mess. It's my brother's mess. It's your mess. But it's not mine. Make them clean it up because it's not my mess. And how many of us take the same approach to the cries for justice in our world today? Homelessness, not my mess. Abortion, not my mess. Healthcare, education, inequality, you name it, not my mess. What we have to realize, though, is that any lack of concern for restorative justice found in the church today is in complete opposition to the heart of God. And yet, how often Are we so content to do our Sunday thing and we sing our happy little songs if we're even singing at all, and we maybe tithe once in a while, but then when it comes to things like doing justice, something so integrally important to the heart of God, we're on the sidelines like some snot-nosed little kids shouting from our bedroom, "It's not my mess." What does God think of this attitude? Amos chapter 5, another prophet, he says this, God speaking, "Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your instruments. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream." Again and again, God is saying this through Isaiah and Hosea and Malachi and Zechariah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel and the rest. He's like, so what of your sacrifices? So what of your religiosity? It's all fig leaf religion, right? Big whoop. Like God is like, it's like he's screaming to get through to us. He's shouting for us to hear him say that we can come to church all we want, and we can sing our heart out to God all we want, and we can tithe all of our money away. But if we're not committed to doing justice according to the heart of God, it all means nothing. Take away from me the noise of your worship. God literally says, do justice. Because the aches of the brokenhearted break the heart of God. And the wounds of the hurting in our world wound the heart of God. And if we claim to be people after God's own heart, then we too must make those aches and those wounds our own and then do something about it. So here are 3 steps to do justice. Ready? 3 steps. Eyes, ears, hands. Eyes. Open your eyes to see who is in need wherever you are. Learn to look for the overlooked people. Learn to see the unwanted people, the unseen people. And then next, open your ears to hear what they need. That means listen, ask questions, stop talking and listen and learn and be prayerful. And at times, like even ask the Spirit, Holy Spirit, this person's talking to me. I don't think this is the whole story. Help me hear what they're not even saying so I can know what their need is and meet it. And then finally, open your hands to meet that need. That means being resourceful. Think about solutions to problems in real time. Like, for example, if someone says they're looking for a place to live, then ask them what they're looking for, how many rooms, what price range, and then just spend the next 10 minutes looking together on the internet for options or reaching out to your network of friends. Maybe you know a realtor or somebody who can help make a connection. It's not complicated, but it does take time. But this time has been given to us. It's been gifted to us by God for such a purpose as this, to be given away, isn't it? Now, I know it's not your mess, right? I know it's not your mess, but doing justice means we make the mess our own. We open our eyes, we open our ears, we open our hands to see the need, to meet the need. That's doing justice. Now, it's a little different than we thought, right? Doing justice, a little bit different than we thought. Wait till you see what mercy's all about. Next, loving mercy demands more than we realize. Loving mercy demands more than we realize. After Micah gets through telling us to do justice, he says love mercy is next. But what's mercy? Is mercy kind of like oh, you poor thing? Like pity? Oh, I just feel awful about what's going on with you. Is that mercy? I think we often think of it that way. But the word that Micah uses here for mercy is a very particular word in the Hebrew. It's intended to convey a very specific idea, and it's a very tough word. It's actually the word chesed. hesed in the Hebrew. And it's a very difficult word to translate, but the sense of it is that it is a faithful, loyal, unconditional, covenantal love. It continues to love, continues to love, continues to love. That is mercy. Now, that's not a contractual love, but a covenantal one. So what's a covenant, right? Let's contrast a contract and a covenant. Let's take a look at this. A contract lays out the terms, right? As long as we both live up to our end of the agreement, we stick together. But if one of us breaks it, or falls short in any way, then we're through. That's a contract. Many of us sign contracts in everyday life. But a covenant says this. A covenant says, here are the terms of the agreement. But even if you fail to live up to your end of the bargain, even if you fall short in some way, and this comes down on me in a serious way, I will still hold up my end of the agreement. Because my love for you is not conditional. My love is not contingent on you keeping your side of the agreement. In essence, mercy says, I am loyal to you, not the terms. I'm loyal to you, not the terms. This is the word that is used where it says that God is merciful toward us. And how good is it that he is merciful to us and not the terms of our agreement? We see a good example of this in 1 Samuel 18:3. It says that Jonathan made a covenant with David. And it's a good thing he did, because this friendship was going to require a lot of sacrifice from Jonathan. Jonathan was the son of the king. He was next in line, heir to the throne. He's the beloved son of King Saul. But within 2 chapters of this covenant, we see dear old dad chucking spears at Jonathan because of his friendship with David. This is the kind of covenantal love that requires a willing self-sacrifice, because it's for the good of the other person, and it doesn't require repayment of any kind. To love mercy, here's a couple of definitions for us. To love mercy is to stop treating others according to what they have cost you. Loving mercy is to stop treating others according to how they have cost you. It's to wipe clean the record of wrongs that we hold on to at times in our relationships. To love mercy is to treat those who have wronged us as if they never did. See, loving mercy takes doing justice to the next level. Because if justice means loving the oppressed, then mercy means loving the oppressor. That is heavy. If justice means loving the oppressed, loving mercy means loving the oppressor. Justice says, I know it's not my mess, but I'll help clean it up. I know somebody else did this. I'm here with you. But mercy says, this is your mess. You made this mess, and cleaning it comes at great cost to me. But not only will I help you clean it up, but I won't even hold it over your head either. Wow. Like, doing justice may warm your heart, but it's mercy that will melt you to the core. We see this powerfully demonstrated in the musical Les Mis. See, in the story of Les Mis, the lead, Jean Valjean, is an ex-con, and after 19 years in prison, he's released to be on parole. And he's taken in one night by a priest, but then takes advantage of that priest's generosity and ends up stealing some of the silverware from the church and leaves. He makes a mad dash out of that place that night. But Valjean, who's on parole, is caught by the police, and he's brought back to the church to face charges. And the priest, the weirdest thing happens. He interrupts what's happening there, and he says, hey, Valjean didn't steal these. In fact, he left without these. And then he presents pure silver candlesticks for him to take as well. The police leave, and Valjean is blown away. He's stunned. He's stunned because not only was he given something, but he was given even more on top of it. by the very one that he chose to harm. The priest shows us what loving mercy looks like. It goes beyond, it's over the top. It's forgiveness and generosity on top of generosity and forgiveness. But don't think for a second that this is just the stuff of musicals. In fact, I personally know someone, and we're going to call her Jamie, but despite her husband Lance's choices for alcohol abuse and infidelity, Jamie chose not to hold that over him and not to leave him, but instead to stay. And to Lance's sheer surprise, she would not hold it over him, but instead continued to extend grace upon grace. It's one thing to stay, it's another thing to stay and not treat them according to what they've done wrong. Her words, here's what she says. She says, I see so often where we're looking for the out, but I don't see that anywhere in the heart of God. Jamie's a Christian, her husband's not, and she sensed the Lord was trying to use this opportunity to call him, to bring him to God. So she chose not to stay contractually, but covenantally. And the result, I want you to see this picture. This is a cross with a poem that was given at an anniversary from Lance to Jamie. And it's something that she insists that Lance is a man's man, right? He likes to hunt, he likes guns. He's not all about this kind of romantic-y stuff. But this was something he wrote, a poem he wrote for her. And I want to just draw your attention because it draws us to the last couple lines, or a few lines that it tells the story so well. Here's what he writes. He says, one thing I've noticed about your love is a gift like that could only come from above. You may be picking up on this, but today, Lance has given his life to Jesus. And he has begun to experience the life change possible only because of Jesus. But it was because he was able to experience firsthand what a Christian choosing to love mercy looks like, even though it came at incredible cost to herself in the meantime. Valjean and Lance's stories would look nothing like they do if not for the priest and Jamie who chose to love mercy. Now, there's countless transformation that God wants to accomplish through you. Not just in you, but through you. Will you join him? Will you choose to forgive? Will you willingly extend grace when it's undeserved, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts and it costs you something in the process? Jen Wilkins says it so well. She says, as Christians, we should not have a reputation for being merely fair. We should have a reputation for playing favorites with everyone except ourselves. I told you that loving mercy demands more than we realize. And so let me ask, does this feel completely overwhelming to any of us yet? Too daunting of a task. Like some standard required of us that in our own power, we will never be able to live up to ourselves. That's why walking humbly is more important than we imagine. Walking humbly in humility is more important than we imagine. Humility, to quote C.S. Lewis, humility isn't thinking less of yourself. Humility is thinking of yourself less often. See, walking humbly means we stop keeping score. We stop holding on to what she did or he's done or they did, and we stop comparing it with our own record of what we've done and not done. And this only happens, it emerges within us as we start to walk humbly with God. Because as we walk humbly with our God, we become aware of how beautiful he is. And our eyes are filled with the grandeur of who he is, and the power and the glory and how massive and incredible our God is, until all of a sudden, the things that once seemed so huge in our lives, the record and the list of wrongs, begin to seem so very small. Walking with God, growing in our awareness of who he is, humbles us to think of ourselves less frequently. Walking humbly with God then fuels our ability to become people who do justice and love mercy. And the way that we walk humbly with God is when we first begin to see and continue to see how he chose to first walk humbly with us. Philippians 2 describes that God did not hold on to what was his own. He emptied himself. He took on humanity. And then it says, being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Why? Why would he do this? Why is Jesus dying on a cross? He's never sinned. He was sinless. He's perfect. He was wrongly accused. He was wrongly tried. He was wrongly nailed to a tree to die. Why? Why is such an injustice being committed against him? John Stott once said, I could never believe in a God without the cross, because in a world of injustice, how could I believe in a God who was immune from it? And as Tim Keller reminds us in his great book, The Reason for God, of all the religions in the world, only Christianity says that God wasn't immune. See, only Christianity says that on the last day when Jesus stands before us, if we say, Lord, when did we see you naked? When did we see you thirsty? When did we see you a prisoner? He will be able to say, are you kidding me? They cast lots for my garment, I was naked. I cried out, I thirst. I was beaten, I was flogged, I was under the lash. God literally became one of the oppressed. He literally went under the yoke. Why? Jesus shows us that he who deserved the vindication of justice got condemnation, so that we who messed up this world, who deserve condemnation, would instead receive mercy. Jesus plunged himself within our lives. He took all the threads of his glory and at infinite cost to himself, like a fabric, he wove himself into our lives to save us from falling through. In our own power, none of us are able to live up to the standard of what's required of us. None of us can do it. God, what do you want? I can't even do that. But hear the gospel now. That what God requires, Jesus fulfills. Do you hear that? What God wants from us, Jesus does it. What justice demands, Jesus satisfies. And what mercy calls for, Jesus answers. This is why walking humbly is so important. Because it's by walking humbly with our God. It's with him. We're not on our own, but it's walking humbly with him. It's recognizing and admitting that we couldn't really do justice or truly love mercy without him. We are unable, and so we cling so close to God because we see that apart from him, we can't do anything anyway. Walking humbly with your God is the recognition that unless he came in humility to walk with me, I would never have chosen to walk with him. It's acknowledging that without first experiencing his mercy, I could never show mercy to others. If I hadn't first been a recipient of his work of justice in my life, I'd have little reason to do it for others. Remember our married couple from before? I want to share some of the final thoughts that Jamie shared with me from our conversation together. She said, I'm not some superhuman that can extend mercy and forgive the unforgivable. I'm a person who dares believe that God is who he says he is. And that his promises are for me and my family. God has transformed me as much as he's transformed my husband through every obstacle. And I'm grateful, she says, I'm grateful for God's power revealed in our story. These are the words of a person who knows the source of doing justice and mercy, that it's walking with God, walking humbly with him. Because when you walk with God and you see how he's walked with you, you learn to walk in humility too. And we stop saying, it's not my mess. We stop saying that, and instead we begin to say, you know what? It doesn't matter whose mess this is. I'm going to make it mine, no matter the cost. Let's wrap up things this morning with some discussion and prayer. Right at your tables or in rows, group up to groups of 3 to 5 or more, whatever your group is, at least a few of you. And I want us to consider this. Out of the 3 that we've discussed this morning of justice and mercy and humility, out of those 3, which one seems hardest for you and why? Out of the 3, which is the hardest for you to really do right now and why? And then, if God were to supernaturally make you capable of doing that one perfectly, like if he just waved a magic wand and boom, now I can do justice, or boom, now I can walk humbly, whatever it is, what would it look like for you to walk in that this week? What would it look like for you if you woke up tomorrow supernaturally able to do the very one that you feel is so difficult right now? How would that change your week? How would that change your relationships this week? How would that change your attitude in your work? How would that change your gratitude in life? Think about that. So first, what's the hardest and why? And then second, how would things change if you could do it magically? Those are the 2 questions. I'll be around. If you want, I'll be by the cross. I can walk around too. Come pray with me. Come talk with me. I'd love to hear what God is doing and what he's saying in your life. But after everyone in your group, at your table, in your rows, after you've all had a chance to share and you've taken a minute, then what I want you to do is to pray it forward. Pray one another forward in that. Pray one another forward in what God is calling you to do. If I was at your group, I would tell you, pray for the person to your right so that everyone gets prayed for. Whatever it is, find a way to pray everyone forward. And then as we head out of this place, may we find that the Lord is ordering our steps in accordance with his justice, his mercy, and his humility this week. Amen.